The smoke was still rising when the human soldier, Sergeant Cole, heard the weak groan coming from the burning wreckage. His squad had already moved ahead. Command had told them to leave all wounded alien allies behind. No rescue, no exceptions. But something in that cry stopped him cold. It wasn't just pain. It was fear. Desperate, helpless fear. When he reached the source, he didn't find a soldier. He found a young alien warrior, bleeding, paralyzed, half covered in rubble. Her silver skin was scorched. Her eyes locked onto his, not with hate, not with anger, but with a silent plea to not leave her behind like the others had. Plot. Summary for Part 1. 800 words. Introduce Sergeant Cole. A loyal but independent human soldier. Describe the fierce battlefield on the alien moon. Show how alien and human forces fought side by side till they were ordered to retreat. Cole hears something in the smoke and rubble and finds the wounded alien girl. He remembers the rule. No alien rescues. Everyone else ignores her. Calls her a liability. Cole stands frozen, unsure until she whispers something in her language and reaches for him weakly. He makes the decision to carry her out, but now the real danger begins. His own kind will not forgive this act of mercy. The sky burned red above the war-torn valley, where smoke choked the air and metal screamed as ships fell from the sky, and Sergeant Cole moved with heavy boots over shattered ground, where silence came only in short breaths between gunfire and distant explosions, and he followed the retreat order, with his squad heading toward the last evac point, as instructed by command. With no time to look back, and no room to think about who was left behind in the wreckage. But then he heard something strange, something soft, not the cry of a beast, or the echo of war, but a voice low and broken, like someone calling for help from beneath the earth, and he stopped for a moment and turned his head, trying to hear it again while his squad kept running, unaware of the sound, and his instincts told him to ignore it, that it was probably nothing, maybe just his mind playing tricks on him, after so many hours of chaos and killing still. He moved closer toward the fallen wreck, where twisted metal glowed, orange from heat, and black smoke curled like claws, and the sound came again. This time clearer, this time human but not human, and he stepped over debris and rubble, and found her half buried under the frame of a destroyed transport ship. Her armor scorched, her skin torn and glowing faint silver like moonlight, her eyes half open and glassy, but still alive, still pleading. She was an alien warrior from the Allied front line, one of the Alari race, with long limbs and high bone ridges, and soft, glowing lines running through her neck and arms, and Cole recognized her rank from the crest on her shoulder. She had been a commander, someone important, someone who had fought hard, but now she lay paralyzed, unable to move, and left behind like trash. Like she meant nothing. His radio buzzed in his ear with voices calling for him to hurry up, to keep moving, to leave all wounded allies behind as per order, and no one wanted to risk extractions on the alien side, because they said it was too dangerous, too slow, too pointless. But Cole stood still, staring at the girl, as her fingers twitched weakly, trying to grab a broken piece of her weapon. Her lips moved, but he could not hear the words, only feel the pain in her voice, and the fear in her eyes. She was scared not of dying, but of dying alone, and forgotten, and that fear hit him harder than any bullet ever could, and he remembered a moment long ago, when his own brother had died in his arms, back on Earth, and how much it meant just to be held, just to not be alone, and now he saw the same thing in her, the same silent scream to not be left behind. Cole dropped to one knee beside her, checking her pulse, checking her injuries, knowing she could not walk, not fight, not defend herself, and his mind screamed to leave her to follow orders, to think of the mission, and the risks, and the fact that saving her could mean court-martial, or worse. But his heart whispered something else, something louder, something that said, "This is why you're human, this is what makes you different." He pulled the wreckage off her piece by piece, careful not to hurt her more, and every second the heat grew worse, and his lungs burned from smoke, and his hands bled from the jagged metal, but he kept going, until she was free, and he lifted her in his arms, her body light and trembling, and she gasped softly as her head rested against his shoulder, and for the first time, her eyes softened, not with fear, but with something like trust. He looked back once more, toward his squad disappearing into the dust, into safety, into the future that didn't include her. And he knew he was now alone with her, and the whole world against them, and yet he took the first step forward, through fire and ash and broken stone, carrying the alien warrior, who everyone else had given up on, who everyone else had left to die. Every step felt heavier, every shadow held danger. But Cole did not stop, did not slow, and the alien girl held on as best she could, her breath shallow, but steady, and her fingers now wrapped gently around his wrist, as if to say thank you, or maybe do not leave me, or maybe you're all I have. No, and In that moment, the war didn't matter, and the orders didn't matter, and the rules didn't matter. Because a human soldier had made a choice to save someone who couldn't save herself. And in doing so, he lit a spark that would change the course of everything, that would shake the trust of command and awaken something powerful and dangerous and beautiful in the one he carried through fire. Cole moved through the ruins with heavy steps, the weight of the alien girl in his arms, and the heat pressing from all sides as flames licked the air, and ash clung to his skin, and he felt the eyes of ghosts watching him from the wreckage, silent reminders of what had been lost, and what he was now risking by choosing mercy over duty. Behind him, the last evac shuttle rose into the sky, its engines roaring like thunder, fading into the clouds, and with it went his only clear path back to safety. And the voices on his com grew louder, sharper, angry, asking where he was, warning him that he would be marked as non-compliant and abandoned. If he did not report in within 60 seconds, he did not answer. He had no words, no explanations that would make sense to men who saw war as math and soldiers as pieces and allies as tools, and he looked down at the alien girl in his arms. Her eyes barely open, her skin flickering with faint light like a dying ember, and he could feel her breath against his chest, weak but really moved deeper into the ruins, heading for a hidden ridge. He remembered from old recon, a place where the scanners often failed to reach, a place where he could hide until he figured out what to do, and as he walked he passed a broken flag, torn and buried in dust, its symbol once proud, now forgotten, and he realized just how quickly loyalty turned to silence when orders changed. The wind howled between the broken walls and shattered towers, and Cole kept going one step at a time until he found the old tunnel entrance, half buried by a collapsed roof, and he pushed the debris aside, using strength he did not know he had, and carried the alien down into the darkness, where the noise of war faded above like a storm. Moving away inside the tunnel, it was cold and quiet, and the only sound was the ragged breathing of the girl and the distant rumble of far-off bombs, and Cole set her down gently on a blanket of dust, and checked her wounds again, wrapping what he could with old cloth and melted armor strips, and doing everything he knew, from field training and desperation. She looked at him, then really looked, her gaze steady despite the pain, and she raised a trembling hand toward her chest and tapped a glowing mark there, and then touched his shoulder gently, as if trying to share something, trying to speak without words, and he saw the look in her eyes, not just fear, but warning, something bigger than her, something chasing her, or maybe hunting them both. Before he could ask, a sound echoed through the tunnel, sharp and quick, and too clean to be debris, and Cole turned fast, weapon drawn, scanning the shadows, and then he saw it, the red lens of a recon drone hovering low, moving slow, its sensor locked on him. And he knew at once that he had been found, and Mark T fired a single shot. The drone sparked and fell, but the signal had already been sent, and command now knew his location, and worse, they knew he had not left the alien behind, and now he was not just disobedient, he was a traitor in their eyes, and traitors in wartime were erased, not tried, not questioned, just erased. He turned to the alien girl, and her lips moved, forming a word in her language, a word he did not understand, but it sounded like sorrow and fire and hope all at once, and she tried to sit up, but failed, her body too broken and weak, and he knelt beside her and whispered, without knowing why, "I will not let them take you above the tunnel." The sound of engines grew louder, not evac ships, but hunters, fast and cold, and without mercy, and Cole knew he had minutes, maybe less, to escape, and he lifted the girl again, ignoring the pain in his arms and back, and he ran through the tunnel deeper into darkness, guided only by the faint glow of her body and the faint beat of something inside him that refused to break. He reached a junction where the tunnel split and hesitated, and then turned left, toward the mountain pass, where old supply routes once ran, forgotten by the new maps and the new command, and he prayed they would be forgotten, still as he ran, with fire behind and silence ahead, and a promise in his heart that he would not let her die. Alone, far behind him, a voice on the radio called his name, not as a friend, but as a warning, the last call before they sent hunters after him, before they made him disappear from records and history and memory, and Cole switched off the comm and dropped it behind him, letting it shatter on the rocks as he disappeared into the dark with the alien girl in his arms and the whole war chasing him. The mountain winds screamed like lost souls as Cole stumbled through the frozen pass with the alien girl wrapped in his coat, her silver skin turning pale and dull and her breath slowing with every step, and the sky above was gray with storm clouds. And the path ahead was narrow and slick, with ice and death waited on either side like an old friend with cold hands. He had not eaten in a day. His muscles ached, his thoughts blurred, but he did not stop, because stopping meant she would die. And if she died, then everything he had done, every order he had broken, every friend he had left behind, would mean nothing, and so he kept walking, one foot in front of the other, listening to the wind and her heartbeat and the silence of the world that wanted him gone. Then she stirred in his arms, weak but sudden, her body arching slightly, her hands twitching, and her eyes glowing bright for a single second, like a flare in the night, and she gasped as if something burned inside her, and Cole dropped to his knees in the snow, setting her down gently, afraid. She was dying, afraid he had come too late, afraid that hope was just a cruel trick, but she was not dying. Something inside her was changing, something deep and old, and not meant for human eyes. And her chest glowed faintly through her armor, and Cole saw thin veins of blue light running up her neck and arms, pulsing like a heartbeat, like a signal trying to wake something that had been asleep for too long. He watched in stunned silence as she opened her mouth and a small sphere of light rose from her tongue, spinning slowly in the cold air and humming like music, and Cole reached out but stopped, unsure if it was safe, unsure if it was real, and the sphere hovered before him like it was thinking, and then flew into the sky, vanishing into the storm. With speed no machine could match, the alien girl collapsed again, weak and still, and Cole realized whatever that thing was, it had left her weaker than before, and now they had no time, no shelter, no food, and maybe no safety at all, because that light had not just been a signal, it had been a call, and he did not know who would answer, but he knew someone would, and soon he carried her to a shallow cave half covered by rock and snow, and built a fire using broken gear and torn cloth and old fuel cells, and wrapped her in everything he had, and then sat beside her with his weapon ready, listening for drones, or soldiers, or worse, and thinking about the choice he had made, and how strange it felt to know he would not change it. Even now night came hard and fast, with stars hidden behind thick clouds, and strange sounds moving through the wind, sounds not made by humans and not made by animals, and Cole felt the cold bite through his bones and the weight of exhaustion pull at his eyes, but he stayed awake because she could not, and someone had to guard the fire, and the girl, and the fragile line between life and death. Then a light appeared outside the cave, soft and green, like mist, and it moved with purpose, not drifting, not floating, but searching, and Cole aimed his rifle at it, heart pounding, unsure what it was, and unsure what it meant, and the light stopped at the mouth of the cave, pulsing once, twice, and then faded, and in its place stood a tall figure cloaked in black armor, with eyes like stars and hands that glowed with the same light as the girl's veins. Cole stood slowly, ready to fight or run or die, and the figure raised one hand, palm open, and said in a voice that sounded like thunder wrapped in silk, "You carry the chosen one, and now the hunters come for you both, and you must decide if you will run or rise." Before Cole could speak, the figure vanished into the snow like smoke, and Cole turned to the girl, who was now awake, eyes wide and shining, and she whispered a word that sounded like bond and truth and fate, and Cole realized this was bigger than one battle, bigger than one war, and now he was part of something ancient, something buried, something waiting. He stepped out of the cave, rifle raised, eyes scanning the darkness as the wind screamed louder, and the snow began to fall in thick, heavy sheets, and far in the distance he saw lights rising into the sky, red and sharp and fast, and he knew the hunters had arrived, and the real fight was just beginning. He looked down at the alien girl, who reached out and touched his hand, her fingers still shaking but warm and strong, and in that touch he felt not weakness but promise, not fear but power, and he knew he would not run, because whatever came next, he would face it with her by his side, and the storm at his back. The sky cracked open with green lightning, as the first hunter descended from the clouds, its black armor shining like glass, and its wings wide and silent as death, and Cole saw it from the cave mouth, standing tall on a broken ledge above the trees. And even from this distance, he felt the weight of its presence, like gravity bending around fear itself. He pulled the girl back into the cave, her breath short, her skin pulsing faint blue like a warning, and she whispered a name, not in human tongue, but in something older, and when she spoke the rocks around them seemed to listen, and the fire dimmed, and the very air turned colder and heavier, as if time itself had slowed to hear her words. The hunter did not move quickly, it did not need to, it knew where they were. It was not a machine, and not a man, but something made from both, a thing that lived in the silence between stars and killed, not for anger or revenge, but because it had been made to end what should never rise again, and now it had come for her. Cole checked his rifle, checked his sidearm, checked the last 2 grenades he had left, and knew none of it would matter, and still he stood between her and the cave entrance, because if this was the end, it would not come easy, and it would not come without fire, and he would burn before he let it touch her. Then the cave shook from a low hum, and the girl reached out her hand toward the fire and whispered again, and the flames turned blue and rose in a spiral, and from within the light a symbol appeared, floating in the air, sharp and ancient, and made of pure light, and the hunter outside paused, its head tilting as if it recognized the mark. She was not just a soldier, she was a key, a beacon, maybe even a weapon, something The enemy feared not because of what she had done, but because of what she might become, and now Cole understood why they left her to die. Because those in power always fear what they cannot control, and she was never meant to live, but she had lived. And now she was awakening, and Cole was not just a soldier anymore. He was the one who carried her, the one who chose her, the one who stood when others ran. And the hunters would not stop, not now, not ever, because to protect her was to defy an ancient silence that had kept galaxies in chains. Snow fell harder, covering their tracks, but not hiding their trail, because the hunter moved with senses. Beyond sight, beyond sound, it followed fear, it followed fate, and it would not leave until the light was gone, and the flame of her soul was snuffed out. They could not stay, and Cole knew it, and she knew it, and together they moved out into the storm. Him carrying her again, her hands wrapped around his neck, eyes glowing brighter now, like stars caught in fog, and her strength slowly returning with every step, as if the storm itself fed her. They reached the old bridge, broken in half by time and war, and Cole had no choice but to leap across the gap with her in his arms, and the wind screamed and the wood cracked, but they landed hard on the other side, and kept running into the forest of crystal trees that grew with quiet music in the dark behind them. The hunter leaped, without sound, without weight, and Cole turned and fired, once, twice, but the bullets melted before they reached it, and the hunter raised one hand, and the trees around them began to bend and crack and twist as if screaming without sound. And Cole felt his legs grow heavy, his heart beat slower, but the girl reached out and placed her palm on his chest, and the blue light from her skin spread to his armor, to his hands, to his weapon, and suddenly the world snapped back into motion, and Cole fired again, and this time the shot struck true, and the hunter stumbled back. Black armor cracked, glowing fluid dripping onto the snow like oil and stars. They ran again, faster, this time through the forest, through the storm, and into a cave hidden behind a wall of crystal, where the air felt warm and old and safe. And there she collapsed in his arms, and smiled for the first time, not because the danger was over, but because he had not let go. He looked down at her, and she looked up at him, and in that moment, without words, they knew they had crossed a line no one ever returned from, and ahead of them lay not safety but war, and not silence but the awakening of something powerful that had slept too long. And in the dark behind them, the broken hunter rose with shattered mask and burning eyes, and whispered one word into the storm before vanishing into the wind and the snow and the fire, and that word was chosen. The moment her hand touched the wall of the crystal cave, the world around them shifted, not with sound or light but with memory, and Cole blinked as the walls began to pulse and shimmer with images moving like smoke within glass, and the alien girl's eyes widened, not with fear but sorrow, as she whispered a name he could not understand, a name that made the cave tremble like an old heart. Remembering pain, she was not just hiding here, she was returning, and this place, this forgotten chamber of glowing walls and silent echoes, was not a shelter. It was a vault, and it had waited for her for years, maybe centuries, and now with her return, it stirred like something waking from a deep and bitter sleep, and the glow from her veins synced with the walls, as if her blood carried a forgotten key. Cole looked around the chamber, watching as the shapes in the glass formed cities of light, and towers of flame, and battles fought above oceans of black and stars that wept fire, and all of it vanished the moment she pulled her hand away, and fell to her knees, shaking and silent, as if the memories had drained something deep inside her, something she had fought to forget. He knelt beside her, and touched her shoulder gently, and she turned toward him slowly and whispered that the chamber was a memory bank left by her people before the fall, before the betrayal, before they were scattered across the stars, and hunted and turned into weapons, and slaves and warnings. She said she had been one of the guardians trained to protect the last knowledge of her kind, but when the betrayal came, she was forced to flee, and this cave had been sealed by her own hand before she escaped, and now the key had returned to her, and so had the bird. Listened in silence, as her voice cracked with the weight of it all, and she spoke of a weapon not made to destroy but to restore, a beacon hidden deep beneath the mountain, that could send a call across space, a call not for war but for unity, for truth, for the surviving fragments of her kind to rise again. But, to use it, she needed strength and focus, and the full pattern that had been locked away in her blood and mind, and now awoke with every step she took, every choice she made, and now the enemy knew the signal had begun, and they would not stop until her voice was silenced again. Forever. Cole stood and walked to the far side of the chamber, where a circle of light waited, humming softly like a sleeping machine, and he asked what it was, and she said it was the door to the core, but it could only open when she was ready. When she had accepted everything she had run from, and embraced the truth of what she carried. Then the cave shook as if in answer, and the entrance burst open, with force not from wind or storm, but from shadow, and the broken hunter stepped into the chamber with a hiss of static and burning light. Its face shattered, but its core still pulsing with hate and purpose, and it spoke in a voice like grinding stone. You cannot unlock the beacon because you are broken, and the past cannot be rewritten. And she stood slowly, eyes glowing brighter than ever, her body still weak, but her voice strong, and she said the past was not lost, only buried, and now it would rise again. The hunter charged, and Cole moved without thinking, placing himself between the hunter and the girl, firing shot after shot, while the chamber shook, and the crystals screamed with light, and the hunter's armor cracked with each blast. But it did not fall. It could not fall, not until the core was severed. Then the girl raised both hands, and the air shimmered, and the walls responded. The crystals sang, and the memory surged into her, like a river of light, and she screamed not in pain but in release, as the knowledge filled her, and the chamber opened a path behind her, a stair of light leading down into the heart of the mountain. Cole grabbed her hand and pulled her back, as the hunter lunged again, and the two of them dove through the new passage, just before the ceiling collapsed, sealing the hunter behind, and leaving only darkness and echoes in its place. They fell together onto a floor of smooth metal far below the surface, and above them the chamber sealed itself, and the walls around them came alive with flowing light, symbols, maps, stars, and voices, whispering in a forgotten language. And she looked at Cole and said, "We are almost there, but once the beacon wakes, the galaxy will never be the same again." The floor beneath their feet was not rock, not metal, but something alive, something humming with quiet power, like a sleeping heart, too large to imagine. And when Cole looked down, he saw patterns flowing beneath the surface, moving like water, like veins of light, and the alien girl beside him reached out with both hands, and the walls responded, pulsing once with a soft glow that felt almost like breath. This was not just a place, this was a machine, and not just a machine, but a memory of something far older than their war, older than their people, older maybe than the stars themselves. And as the air grew warmer and the lights grew brighter, the chamber shifted around them, revealing a staircase of glass that led upward to a platform floating in the middle of the room, surrounded by orbs of slow-moving fire. She stepped forward slowly, her feet light, her face calm, and Cole followed without a word, weapon still in hand, eyes watching every shadow, because peace in a place like this could only mean that something worse waited just beyond, and he had seen enough battle to know that quiet could be louder than any scream. At the center of the platform stood a tall column of blue crystal wrapped in glowing threads, and at its base was a circle with the same symbol she had drawn in the cave with the fire. And when she stepped inside, the symbol lit up, and the crystal began to shift, splitting slowly into 3 parts, revealing something suspended within it. Was a sphere no bigger than a heart, but it pulsed like a star. And when she looked at it, her voice trembled as she said, "This is the seed of the beacon, the last voice of my people, before we fell, before they turned our hope into fear, and scattered our names into dust." Asked what it would do if activated, and she looked at him with eyes full of storm and flame, and said it would call them all back, every surviving fragment, every lost warrior, every silent watcher hidden across systems. And if they came, then everything would change, and if they did not, then she would die knowing the truth had been spoken once more. He stepped beside her, and placed one hand on her shoulder, not as a soldier, but as a shield, and said, "Then speak, because I will not let them silence you again." And with that she touched the sphere, and the light exploded outward, filling the chamber with color and sound and memory that poured through the walls, into the stone, into the sky, and beyond. Far above, in orbit, machines stirred, ancient ones that had waited for this signal, hidden in silence, coded to awaken only if the last seed bloomed. And across distant moons and broken stations, those who still carried her blood felt the call and turned their faces to the stars. But not all who heard it were allies, and in the cold void beyond the system, a fleet turned in silence, black ships without flags or names, vessels that moved like shadows and swallowed light. And at their core sat a mind that had once known her, once betrayed her, once feared the light. Now rising again inside the beacon chamber, the girl collapsed, and Cole caught her body shaking from the effort, her veins burning bright as if her blood had become energy itself. And above them, the crystal closed again, locking the seed inside, where it would now sing across the stars, forever calling home those who had forgotten who they were. Cole held her close, whispering that she had done it, that she had made the choice that no one else could, and she smiled through tears and said, "I remember now who I am, and I am not afraid anymore." And then the chamber began to shake, not with warning, but with purpose, as if it had finished its work, and now would rest. But the calm did not last, because outside the walls, they heard the roar of engines, the sound of weapons charging, the voice of a hunter, not broken but reborn, now fused with something else, something darker and stronger and angry that it had failed to stop her. Cole stood, weapon raised, body shaking from exhaustion but heart steady, and the girl stood beside him, no longer trembling, no longer silent, her eyes shining bright and her voice calm as she said this time, "I will fight too," and the walls around them began to open, revealing the path back to the surface, now lit with light, now ready for war. And as they stepped forward together into the rising wind, into the sound of thunder, into the jaws of the enemy, Cole knew that the story had already changed, because one human had made a choice, and one alien had found her voice, and now nothing in the galaxy could stop what had begun. The sky was no longer gray, it was burning gold, as the beacon's signal rose through clouds and stars and systems, and as Cole and the alien girl climbed from the mountain's heart to face what waited above, the air itself seemed alive, full of voices, whispers, echoes, of those who once fought and fell, and now stirred once more, drawn by her call. The path was lit with crystal and memory, and behind them the mountain sealed itself as if protecting its secret until the time was right, and Cole looked up at the storm waiting at the edge of the ridge, dark ships circling like vultures, and one shape descending slower than the rest, its form too large, too quiet, too full of death. It was the final hunter, not a soldier, not a drone, but something built to end what could not be allowed to live, something once born of her people, now twisted, now reprogrammed, now sent to erase her from history. One last time, and as it landed before them, wings folding like knives, its voice filled the valley with silence. "You are not the last, you are the spark, and sparks are dangerous and must be destroyed before they become fire." And she stepped forward, her hair moving in the wind, her skin glowing bright silver and blue, and she said, "We were fire long before you turned to shadow, and today that fire will rise again." Cole raised his weapon, but she held out her hand and said, "Not yet." And then she began to speak, not to the hunter, but to the sky, her voice carrying power, not sound, and above them the clouds parted, and the light changed, and figures began to appear, not human, not machine, but kin, glowing across the ridges, across the air, drawn by her voice, and her signal, and her choice. They came on wings of light, an armor of stone, some scarred, some whole, all silent, and Cole watched with wide eyes, as the galaxy answered her call, and for the first time he saw what unity looked like, not built by force or order, but by pain and memory and hope that refused to die. Hunter roared and charged, its blade crackling with black energy, its eyes blind with purpose, and Cole moved first, throwing himself into its path, firing as he ran, knowing it would not be enough, but willing to try, willing to die, if it meant giving her one more second to finish what she had begun. But he was not alone, because as the hunter struck, a dozen lights moved behind him, and blades met blades, and the sound of ancient weapons filled the sky. As the Forgotten rose, and the fire spread, and in the center of it all stood the girl once left to die, once silent, now shining. She lifted both hands, and from her chest a final light burst forth, not an explosion, not an attack, but a memory so strong it broke through every system, every shield, and the hunter froze, not from damage but from recognition, because it remembered who she was, who it had been, and for a single second its blade lowered in. That second Cole pulled her back, and together they ran across the ridge as the light of the beacon pulsed again, stronger, brighter, echoing through the stars, and the hunter behind them screamed one last time before the mountain itself answered with a wave of force that lifted the air and shattered the sky, and turned the machine to dust. Followed real silence, soft and wide and full, and the air calmed, and the ships above turned and vanished, not in fear but in peace, and the mountain behind them closed forever, not as a grave, but as a promise, and those who had come stood in rows across the ridges, heads bowed, armor glowing, and eyes on the girl who had brought them home. Cole dropped to one knee, not from injury, but from something else, something heavier than pain, and she knelt beside him, and took his hand and said, "You gave me the chance to remember who I was, and now I give you the same." And she touched his chest, and he felt something rise, something deep, something human, and more. They stood together on the ridge, not as soldier and alien, not as protector and burden, but as allies, as echoes, as beginning, and the wind carried their names across the stone, and the dust and the stars, where new stories would be written, not in silence, but in flament. Somewhere far beyond, beyond war, beyond death, beyond even memory, a child would grow up, hearing the tale of the girl who was left behind, and the human who refused to walk away. And that story would live, because some fires never die.